Book 8 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era by Karlovac Townway. First of last seed, 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. They were gathered in the Duke's courtyard at twilight, enjoying the smell and warmth of a fire of dry branches and bitter green leaves. Tiny embers flew into the sky, hanging for a few moments before vanishing. I was rash, agreed the Duke soberly, but Lorcan has had his laugh and all is well. The Morag Tong will not assassinate the Emperor now that my payment to them is at the bottom of the inner sea. I thought you had made some sort of a truce with the Daedra princes. What your sailors called a Daedra might have been one, said Sothasil. Perhaps it was a rogue battle mage or even a lightning bolt that destroyed your ship. The prince and the emperor are en route to take possession of Ald Lambasi as our truce agreed. It is certainly typical of the Cyrodiil to assume that their concessions are negotiable, while ours are not. Vivek pulled out a map. Vivek pulled out a map. We can meet them here in this village to the northwest of Ald Lambasi Vervinthil. But will we meet them to talk, as ask Almalexia, or to make war? No, it had an answer to that. You know what? I think I will, Blake. 15 last deed, 2920, Vervinthil Morrowind. A late summer squall blew through the small village, darkening the sky, except for lashing of lightning which leapt from cloud to cloud like acrobats. Water rushed down the narrow streets ankle deep, and the prince had to shout to be heard by his captains but a few feet away from him. There's an inn up ahead. Well, wait. We'll wait there for the storm to pass before pressing on to Ald Lambasi. The inn was warm and dry and bustling with business. Barmaids were rushing back and forth, bringing grief and wine to a back room, evidently excited about a famous visitor. Someone who was attracting more attention to the mere heir to the Empire of Tamriel. Amused, Juliak watched them run until he overheard the name of Vivek. My Lord Vivek, he said, bursting into the back room. You must believe me, I knew nothing about the attack on Blackgate until after it happened. We will, of course, be returning it to your care forthwith. I wrote you a letter to that effect at your palace in Balmora, but obviously you're not there. He paused, taking in the many new faces in the room. I'm sorry, let me introduce myself. I am Juliak Cyrodiil. My name is Almalexia, said the most beautiful woman the prince had ever seen. Won't you join us? Sothasil said a serious-looking Dunmer in a white cloak, shaking the prince's hand and showing him to a seat. Indiril Brindisi, Dorum, Duke Prince of Mournhold, said the massively built man next to him as he sat down. I recognize that the events of the last month suggest at best that the Imperial army is not under my control, said the prince after ordering some wine. This is true. The army is my father's. All right, too rich. Good night. Have a good one. I understand that the Emperor was going to be coming to Ald Lambasi as well, said Almalexia. Officially he is, said the prince cautiously. Unofficially he's still back in the Imperial city. He's met with an unfortunate accident. Vivek glanced at the Duke quickly before looking at the prince. An accident? He's fine, said the prince quickly. He's alive. He'll live, but it looks like he'll lose an eye. It was an altercation that has nothing to do with the war. The only good news is that while he recovers, I have the use of his seal. Any agreement we make here and now will be binding to the Empire, both in my father's reign and in mine. Then let's start agreeing, smiled Almalexia. 16th of last seed, 2920, Roth Naga, Cyrodiil. The timely hamlet of Roth Naga greeted Cassir with its colorful houses perched on a promontory overlooking the stretch of the Worthgarian mountain plain and high rock beyond. Had he been in a better mood, the sight would have been breathtaking. As it was, he could only think that in practical terms, a small village like this would have meager provisions for himself and his horse. He rode down into the main square, where an inn called the Eagle's Cry stood. Directly the stable boy to house and feed his horse. Cassir walked into the inn and was surprised by its ambience. A minstrel he had heard play once in Gilverdale was performing a jaunty old tune to the clapping of the mountain men. Sorry, I could just imagine the most amazing scene. Such forced merriment was not what Cassir wanted at the moment. A glum Dunmer woman was seated at the only table far from the noise, so he took his drink there and sat down without invitation. It was only when he did so that he noticed that she was holding a newborn baby. "I've just come from Morrowind," he said rather awkwardly, lowering his voice. "I've been fighting for Vivek and the Duke of Mournhold against the Imperial Army. A traitor to my people, I guess you'd call me." "I am also a traitor to my people," said the woman, holding up her hand, which was scarred with a brand symbol. "It means that I can never go back to my homeland." "Well, you're not thinking of staying here, are you?" laughed Cassir. "It's certainly quaint, but come wintertide, there's going to be snow up to your eyelashes. It's no place for a new baby. What is her name?" "Bosriel. It means beauty of the forest." "Where are you going?" "Dwynnen, on the bay in High Rock. You're welcome to join me. I could use the company." He held out his hand. Cassir whitely. "Turala," said the woman after a pause. She was going to use her family's name first, as is tradition, but she realized that it was no longer her name. "I would love to accompany you. Thank you." 19 Last Seed 2920, Auld Lambasi, Morrowind. 5 men and 2 women stood in the silence of the great room of the castle. The only sound, the scrawl of quill on parchment and the gentle tapping of rain on the large picture window. As the prince set the seal of Cyrodiil on the document, the peace was made official. The Duke of Mournhold broke out in a roar of delight, ordering wine, brought in to commemorate the end of 80 years of war. Only Sotha Sil stood apart from the group. His face betrayed no emotion. Those who knew him best knew he did not believe in endings or beginnings, but in the continuous cycle of which this was but a small part. "My prince," said the castle steward, unhappy of breaking the celebration, "there is a messenger here from your mother, the Empress. He asked to see your father, but as he did not arrive." Juliek excused himself and went to speak with the messenger. "The Empress does not live in the Imperial City?" asked Vivek. "No," said Almalexia, shaking her head sadly. "Her husband has imprisoned her in Blackmarsh, fearing that she was plotting a revolution against him. She is extremely wealthy and has powerful allies in the Western Colovian estates, so he could not marry another or have her executed. They've been at an impasse for the last 17 years since Juliek was a child." The prince returned a few minutes later. His face betrayed his anxiety, though he took troubles to hide it. "My mother needs me," he said simply. "I'm afraid I must leave at once. If I may have a copy of the treaty, I will bring it with me to show the Empress the good we have done today, and then I will carry it on to the Imperial City so it may be made official." Prince Juliek left with the fond farewells of the 3 of Morrowind. As they watched him ride out into the rain-swept night south towards Blackmarsh, Vivek said, "Tamriel will be much healed when he has the throne." 31 Last Seed 2920, Dorza Pass, Blackmarsh. The moon was rising over the desolate quarry, streaming with swamp gas from a particularly hot summer as the prince and his 2-guard escort rode out of the forest. The massive piles of earth and dung had been piled high in antiquity by some primitive, long-dead tribe of Blackmarsh, hoping to keep out some evil from the north. Evidently, the evil had broken through at Dorza Pass, the large crack in the sad, lonely rampart that stretched for miles. The black twisted trees that grew on the barrier cast strange shadows down like a net tangling. The prince's mind was on his mother's cryptic letter, hinting at the threat of an invasion. He could not, of course, tell the Dunmer about it, at the very least until he knew more and had notified his father. After all, the letter was meant for him. It was its urgent tone that made him decide to go directly to Gideon. The Empress had also warned him about a band of former slaves who attacked caravans going into Dorza Pass. She advised him to be certain to make his imperial shield visible, so they would know he was not one of the hated Dunmer slavers. Upon riding into the tall weeds that flooded through the pass like a noxious river, the prince ordered that his shield be displayed. "I can see why the slaves use this," said Prince's captain. "It's an excellent location for an ambush." Juliek nodded his head, but his thoughts were elsewhere. What threat of invasion could the Empress have discovered? Were the Akaviri on the seas again? If so, how could his mother from her cell in the Castle Geovis know of it? A rustle in the weeds, and a single sharp human cried behind him interrupted his ponderings. Turning around, the prince discovered that he was alone. His escort had vanished. The prince peered over the stretch of the moonlit sea of grass, which waved in most hypnotic patterns to the ebb and flow of the night wind billowing through the pass. It was impossible to tell if a struggling soldier was beneath this system of vibrations, a dying horse behind another. A high whistling wind drowned out any sound the victims of the ambush might be making. Juliek drew his sword and thought about what to do, his mind willing his heart not to panic. He was closer to the exit of the pass than the entrance. Whatever had slain his escort must have been behind him. If he rode fast enough, perhaps he could outrun it. Spurring his horse to gallop, he charged for the hills ahead, framed by the mighty black piles of dirt. When he was thrown, it happened so suddenly he was hurtling forward before he was truly conscious of the fact. He landed several yards beyond where his horse had fallen, breaking his shoulder and his back on impact. Fuck! A numbness washed over him, and he stared at his poor dying steed, its belly sliced open by one of several spears jutting up just below the surface of the grass. Prince Juliek was not able to turn and face the figure that had emerged from the grass, nor able to move to defend himself. His throat was cut without ceremony. Well, that sucks. Miramir cursed when he saw the face of his victim more clearly in the moonlight. He had seen the Emperor at the Battle of Bodrum when he fought His Imperial Majesty's command, and this was clearly not the Emperor. Searching the body, he found the letter and a treaty signed by Vivek, Amalexius, Sothasel, and the Duke of Mournhold, representing Morrowind, and the Prince Juliek Cyrodiil, representing the Cyrodiilic Empire. Curse my luck, muttered Miramor to himself in the whispering grass. I've only killed a prince. Where's the reward in that? Miramor destroyed the letter, as Zook had instructed him to do, and pocketed the treaty. At the very least, such a curiosity would have some market value. He disassembled the traps as he pondered his next step. Return to Gideon and ask his employer for a lesser reward for killing the heir, or move on to other lands. At the very least, he considered he had picked up 2 useful skills from the Battle of Bodrum. From the Dunmer, he had learned the excellent spear trap, and abandoning the Imperial army, he had learned how to skulk in the grass. The years continued in Hearthfire.